The piercing wail of the lockdown alarm shattered the Tuesday morning calm, like glass against concrete. Red lights strobed through the hallways of Lincoln High School as heavy boots thundered across polished floors. Armed officers with tactical gear swept through doorways, their rifles raised, voices barking commands that echoed off lockers and classroom walls. "Get down, hands where we can see them." Students dove under desks, their textbooks scattering. Teachers pressed themselves against walls, hearts hammering against rib cages. The peaceful routine of third period had exploded into chaos in mere seconds, and nobody understood why. In room 237, 17-year-old Michael Washington had been quietly taking notes on photosynthesis when the alarm began. His mechanical pencil froze mid-sentence as the familiar sound of his ventilator's gentle hum was drowned out by the shrieking alert. His wheelchair was positioned near the window where the morning light helped him read, his medical bag containing his backup equipment hanging from the chair's side pocket. "Michael, get away from the window," Mrs. Chen whispered urgently, her voice tight with fear. The biology teacher's hands shook as she pulled the blinds closed. "Everyone, move to the corner by the supply closet." Michael's classmates scrambled past him, their sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. Sarah Martinez, who sat behind him, hesitated. "Can you move okay? Do you need help?" "I'm fine," Michael said, though his voice carried the slight breathlessness that came with his condition. He maneuvered his wheelchair toward the corner, the familiar whir of the motor barely audible beneath the continuing alarm. 20 minutes earlier, the morning had been ordinary. Michael had arrived at school the same way he did every day, his mother dropping him off at the accessible entrance before heading to her office across town. Dr. Angela Washington served as the chairwoman of the Lincoln County School Board, a position she'd held for 3 years. Her son's education at Lincoln High had always been a source of pride for both of them. He maintained a 3.8 GPA, despite the challenges posed by his muscular dystrophy. "See you tonight, baby," his mother had said, leaning down to kiss his forehead through the passenger window. "Remember, the budget meeting is at 7. Your dad will pick you up after school." Michael had nodded, adjusting the strap of his medical bag. The bag contained his portable suction device, backup ventilator battery, and emergency medications equipment that kept him breathing and alive. It was as much a part of his daily routine as his backpack full of textbooks. Now, huddled in the corner with his classmates, that same medical bag would become the center of a nightmare. The classroom door burst open with a bang that made everyone jump. 3 officers in tactical gear filled the doorway, their faces hidden behind dark visors. The lead officer's rifle swept the room methodically. "Nobody move. Keep your hands visible." Mrs. Chen stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Officers, these are my students. We're following lockdown procedures." "Ma'am, step back." The officer's tone brooked no argument. His eyes, cold and assessing, moved across the huddled teenagers until they landed on Michael. "You, in the wheelchair. What's in the bag?" Michael's heart rate spiked, sending his ventilator into a faster rhythm. It's my medical equipment. Sir, I have muscular dystrophy." Medical equipment. The officer exchanged glances with his partners. "We're going to need to see inside that bag." "Of course," Michael said, reaching for the zipper. His hands shook slightly, not from fear alone, but from the muscle weakness that was part of his condition. "Don't touch it." The second officer's voice cracked like a whip. "Keep your hands where we can see them. Martinez, call for the bomb squad." The words hit the classroom like a physical blow. Sarah gasped audibly. Mrs. Chen's face went white. "There's been a mistake," Michael said, his voice growing weaker as stress affected his breathing. "That bag has my ventilator batteries, my suction machine." "Quiet." The lead officer moved closer, his weapon still raised. "We received a credible report that you're carrying concealed weapons. Until we can verify the contents of that bag, you're a potential threat." The word credible echoed in Michael's mind. Who would make such a report? Who even knew about his medical bag besides his family, teachers, and the school nurse? 3 blocks away, Karen Whitmore sat in her car outside the Starbucks on Maple Street, her manicured fingers gripping a disposable phone. She'd made the call 15 minutes ago, her voice disguised with a tissue held over the mouthpiece. 911. What's your emergency? I need to report a weapon at Lincoln High School. There's a black student in a wheelchair who's been acting suspicious. I saw him with what looked like gun parts in his bag. Can you provide more details, ma'am? His name is Michael Washington. He's in the 200 hallway. The bag hanging from his wheelchair? I think he's hiding firearms in there. Now, watching the police cars race past her window with their sirens wailing, Karen felt a mixture of satisfaction and nervous energy. The plan was working perfectly. By the end of the day, Dr. Angela Washington would be too humiliated, too devastated by her son's arrest, to remain in her position as school board chair. And without Angela's voice advocating for increased special needs funding, Karen's proposal to redirect that money toward the new athletic complex would pass easily. Karen had been fighting the special needs budget increase for months. As a member of the Parent Advisory Council and mother of 2-star athletes, she believed the money would be better spent on facilities that benefited the majority of students. But Angela Washington's passionate speeches about inclusive education and her son's success story had swayed too many board members. Well, after today, no one would see Michael Washington as a success story. Back in room 237, 2 bomb squad technicians had arrived with their specialized equipment. They moved with deliberate care as they approached Michael's medical bag, their heavy suits making soft scraping sounds against the floor. "Can everyone please move to the hallway?" the lead technician said through his helmet speaker. "We need to clear the area." Michael watched helplessly as his classmates filed out, many casting worried glances back at him. Mrs. Chen lingered in the doorway. "He's a good student," she said to no one in particular. "He's never caused any trouble." "Ma'am, please step outside." The scanning took 27 minutes. Michael sat in his wheelchair in the hallway, flanked by armed officers, while the bomb squad methodically examined every item in his medical bag. Students pressed against windows in adjacent classrooms, their faces reflecting confusion and fear. Finally, the lead technician emerged from the classroom carrying Michael's bag. He walked over to the commanding officer and pulled off his helmet, revealing a face flushed with heat and annoyance. "Sir, we've completed our scan. The bag contains medical equipment only. Ventilator batteries, a portable suction device, some medications, and what appears to be backup tubing for his breathing apparatus." The commanding officer studied Michael for a long moment. "Are you certain we received a very specific report?" "I'm certain, sir. There are no weapons or weapon components in this bag. Whoever called this in was either mistaken or deliberately provided false information." The words hung in the air like smoke. Michael felt a flush of vindication mixed with growing anger. Someone had deliberately targeted him, knowing exactly what the consequences would be. Someone had weaponized his disability against him. "Who made the report?" Michael asked, his voice gaining strength despite his exhaustion. The officer's face remained impassive. "That's part of an ongoing investigation. You're free to return to class." But Michael knew that returning to normal would be impossible. By lunchtime, the story had spread through the school like wildfire, morphed and exaggerated with each retelling. "Did you hear about the kid with the bomb? They found weapons in his wheelchair. He was planning something terrible." The truth that he'd been completely innocent, that his medical equipment had been mistaken for weapons, seemed to matter less than the drama of the initial report. During fourth period, Michael sat in his advanced placement English class, trying to focus on Mrs. Patterson's lecture about dramatic irony in Shakespeare. The irony of his own situation wasn't lost on him. He'd become the protagonist in a drama he'd never auditioned for, cast as the villain in other people's imaginations. "Mr. Washington," Mrs. Patterson said gently, "would you care to share your thoughts on Othello's tragic flaw?" Michael looked up, suddenly aware that the entire class was staring at him with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "His tragic flaw is believing lies about the person he loves most," he said quietly. "He lets other people's prejudices poison his own judgment." The classroom fell silent. Mrs. Patterson nodded slowly. "That's very insightful. Michael, and what do you think Othello should have done differently?" "He should have trusted Desdemona. He should have questioned his sources instead of accepting their version of truth." Michael's voice grew stronger. "He should have remembered that people who claim to be your friends sometimes have their own agendas." After school, as Michael waited for his father's car in the pickup zone, he noticed several parents pointing and whispering. Their children, many of whom he'd known since elementary school, seemed to avoid looking in his direction. When his father arrived, a tall, patient man who worked as a civil engineer, Michael could see the worry etched in the lines around his eyes. "How are you holding up, son?" "I'm okay, Dad, but someone did this on purpose. Someone called in that report knowing exactly what would happen." Robert Washington had spent the day fielding phone calls from concerned relatives and family friends. The story had made it onto the local news, though the reporters had been careful to avoid naming Michael due to his age. Still, in a community the size of Lincoln County, anonymity was impossible. "Your mother is devastated," Robert said as they drove home. "She's been getting calls all day from board members, parents, community leaders. Everyone wants to know what really happened." "What does she think about tonight's meeting?" Robert was quiet for a moment. "She's thinking about stepping down from the board. She doesn't want this incident to overshadow the work she's been doing for the district." The words hit Michael like a punch to the chest. His mother had worked tirelessly for years to improve educational opportunities for students with disabilities. Her own experience raising him had given her insights that made her an invaluable advocate. If she stepped down now, who would speak for students like him? "She can't resign, Dad. That's exactly what whoever did this wants." "Michael." "No, think about it. The timing is too convenient. Right before tonight's budget vote. Right before the board decides on special needs funding. This wasn't random." Robert pulled into their driveway, a modest two-story house with a ramp leading to the front door that they'd built when Michael was 12. "Even if you're right, proving it is another matter entirely." Inside, Angela Washington was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and her laptop computer. She looked up as they entered, and Michael could see she'd been crying. "Baby," she said, opening her arms. Michael maneuvered his wheelchair close enough for her to hug him. "I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm so sorry someone would do something so cruel." "Mom, You can't let them win. You can't step down. Angela pulled back to look at his face. Sweetheart, my being on the board has made you a target. I can't let that continue. If you resign, they'll just find another target. Another family to hurt. Michael's voice was passionate now, despite the mechanical rhythm of his ventilator. You know that special needs funding is going to get cut if you're not there to fight for it. How many other kids like me will suffer because someone decided to use my disability as a weapon against you? The school board meeting that evening was standing room only. Word of the morning's incident had spread throughout the community, drawing parents, teachers, students, and curious residents. The Lincoln County High School auditorium buzzed with conversation as people filed in, many casting glances toward the Washington family seated in the front row. Michael had insisted on attending, despite his parents' concerns. He wore his best button-down shirt and tie, his medical bag positioned discreetly beside his wheelchair. If people were going to stare at him, at least they'd see him as he really was, a student, not a threat. Karen Whitmore entered the auditorium with her husband and teenage sons. Her blonde hair perfectly styled, and her designer handbag clutched tightly in her manicured hands. She'd spent the afternoon coaching herself on how to react if anyone questioned her about the morning's events. Not that anyone would. The 911 call had been made from a disposable phone she'd already thrown away. She took a seat 3 rows behind the Washingtons, close enough to observe Angela's reaction when the inevitable happened. Board President James Hartley called the meeting to order at 7 p.m. sharp. The first item on the agenda was a review of the morning's security incident. Before we proceed with tonight's scheduled business, Hartley said, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system, I want to address the events that occurred at Lincoln High School this morning. While we cannot discuss specific details due to the ongoing investigation, I want to assure the community that at no time were our students or staff in actual danger. A murmur ran through the crowd. Karen leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on the back of Angela's head. The lockdown was initiated based on a report that has since been determined to be unfounded. The student in question was found to be in possession of medical equipment only, exactly as he stated from the beginning. Hartley paused, looking directly at the Washington family. I want to publicly apologize to Michael Washington and his family for the trauma caused by this incident. No student should have to endure what Michael experienced today. Applause broke out in scattered pockets throughout the auditorium. Michael felt his mother's hand squeeze his shoulder. That said, Hartley continued, we take all security reports seriously and will continue to investigate the source of this morning's false alarm. If anyone has information regarding who made the initial report, please contact the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department. Karen's stomach tightened. They couldn't possibly trace the call back to her. She'd been careful, used a disposable phone, disguised her voice. Still, the word investigate sent a chill down her spine. The meeting proceeded to the night's main business, the budget proposal that would determine funding allocations for the coming school year. Angela Washington was scheduled to present the special education funding request, a presentation she'd been preparing for weeks. When her name was called, Angela stood slowly, gathering her papers. But before she could reach the podium, a voice called out from the audience. Point of order. Karen Whitmore was on her feet, her voice carrying an authority that silenced the room. Given the events of this morning, I think we need to question whether Dr. Washington should recuse herself from tonight's vote. The auditorium erupted in surprised murmurs. Angela turned to face Karen, her expression stunned. I'm sorry, Angela said. Karen stepped into the aisle, positioning herself where everyone could see her. Dr. Washington, Your family has been at the center of a major security incident that disrupted education for over 200 students. Your son was the subject of a weapons investigation. I think it would be appropriate for you to step aside from discussions involving special needs funding, given the obvious conflict of interest. The auditorium fell deadly quiet. Michael felt his breathing become labored, not from his medical condition, but from sheer rage. This woman, whoever she was using the morning's trauma as a weapon against his mother. Angela's voice when she spoke was deadly calm. Ms. Whitmore, my son was the victim of a false report this morning. He was completely innocent of any wrongdoing. I fail to see how that creates a conflict of interest regarding my duties as a board member. The appearance of impropriety. Karen began. There is no impropriety. The voice that interrupted belonged to Michael. He'd maneuvered his wheelchair to face the audience, his young face flushed with anger and determination. My name is Michael Washington. This morning, someone called 911 and lied about me. They said I had weapons in my medical bag. They knew that bag contained equipment that keeps me breathing, and they used it against me anyway. Every eye in the auditorium was fixed on him now. Michael took a shaky breath and continued. Someone wanted to hurt my mom's reputation badly enough to traumatize a disabled teenager. Someone was willing to waste police resources, terrify an entire school, and put me through the humiliation of being searched like a criminal, all to score political points. His voice grew stronger despite the mechanical rhythm of his ventilator. My mother has fought for every student in this district, but especially for students like me who need extra support. If she steps down tonight, then whoever made that false report gets exactly what they wanted. And next year, when the special needs budget gets cut, and kids can't get the help they need, remember this moment. Remember that someone was willing to destroy a family to win a budget vote. The silence that followed was complete. Then, slowly, applause began. It started with a few people and spread through the auditorium like wildfire, until it became a thunderous ovation. People rose to their feet, clapping not just for Michael's words, but for his courage. Karen Whitmore remained standing in the aisle, her face pale and her hands shaking. She'd never expected the boy to fight back, never anticipated that he'd turn the situation into a rallying cry for his mother's cause. President Hartley restored order, and the meeting continued. Angela delivered her presentation on special needs funding with renewed passion, her voice strong and clear. The budget passed by a vote of 6-1, with only board member Craig Henderson, Karen's ally, dissenting. After the meeting, as families filed out of the auditorium, Karen lingered near the exit. She needed to salvage something from this disaster, needed to find a way to undermine what had just happened. But as she reached the doors, she found her path blocked by Sheriff Deputy Maria Santos. Ms. Whitmore, I'm Deputy Santos with the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department. I'd like to ask you a few questions about this morning's incident. Karen's blood ran cold. I don't know what you mean. I wasn't at the school this morning. No, ma'am, but we have reason to believe you may have information relevant to our investigation into the false 911 report. I don't know anything about that. Karen's voice was rising, drawing the attention of people still leaving the auditorium. Why would you think Ma'am, we've been reviewing security footage from various locations around town this morning. Would you be willing to come to the station to discuss your whereabouts between 8:30 and 9:00 a.m.? Karen felt trapped. People were staring now, including the Washington family who had paused near the stage. I want to speak to my lawyer. That's your right, ma'am. But I should mention that we've also recovered the disposable phone used to make the call. It was found in a dumpster behind the Starbucks on Maple Street. We're processing it for fingerprints. The words hit Karen like physical blows. She'd been so careful to disguise her voice, to use an untraceable phone. But she'd never thought about fingerprints. Never considered that the police would actually investigate what she'd assumed would be treated as a simple mistake. The phone was purchased yesterday afternoon at the electronics store in Millfield Plaza. Deputy Santos continued. We're pulling surveillance footage from that location as well. Karen's composure cracked completely. This is harassment. You can't prove I did anything wrong. Ma'am, filing a false police report is a felony in this state. So is making terroristic threats, even if those threats are fabricated. If you were involved in this morning's incident, I strongly suggest you cooperate with our investigation. By now, a crowd had gathered to watch the confrontation. Karen could see cell phones being raised, recording her increasingly desperate denials. Her carefully constructed reputation was crumbling in real time. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could stop them. I just wanted to show people that Angela Washington cares more about her son than about the needs of regular students. I never meant for him to get hurt. The confession hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Deputy Santos nodded grimly and reached for her handcuffs. Karen Whitmore, you're under arrest for filing a false police report and making terrorist threats. You have the right to remain silent. As the deputy continued reading Karen her Miranda rights, Michael Washington watched from across the lobby. He felt no satisfaction in seeing her arrested, only a deep sadness that someone would go to such lengths to hurt another person's family. His mother appeared beside his wheelchair, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. How are you feeling, baby? Tired, Michael admitted, but glad it's over. It's not quite over yet, Angela said softly. There's still going to be fallout from this. People will remember what happened, and some of them will always wonder if there was more to the story. Michael looked around the lobby, where small groups of people continued to watch Karen's arrest with expressions of shock and disgust. Maybe, but they'll also remember that you didn't back down. They'll remember that sometimes fighting back is the right thing to do, even when it's hard. 3 months later, Karen Whitmore was sentenced to 6 months in jail, 200 hours of community service, and ordered to pay $15,000 in restitution to cover the cost of the police response. She was also permanently banned from all Lincoln County School District properties. The special needs funding that Angela had fought for was not only approved, but expanded after the board received an outpouring of community support. Letters poured in from families across the district, sharing their own stories of children with disabilities who had been helped by the programs Angela had championed. Michael returned to school the Monday after the board meeting to find his locker decorated with cards and notes from classmates. Sarah Martinez, the girl who sat behind him in biology class, had organized a campaign to show support. We wanted you to know that not everyone believed those rumors, she told him as he read through the messages. Most of us knew you'd never hurt anyone. Mrs. Chen had also made changes to her classroom, creating a bulletin board titled Our Diverse Community, featuring photos and stories from all her students. Michael's photo was prominently displayed, showing him at the regional science fair, where he'd won second place for his project on adaptive technology. At home, the Washington family had slowly returned to their normal routines. Michael continued his advanced placement courses, maintained his high GPA, and began working on college applications. His mother remained active on the school board, and her experience with the crisis had only strengthened her resolve to advocate for vulnerable students. But perhaps the most meaningful change came in the form of a new friendship. A week after Karen's arrest, a mother named Lisa Chen, no relation to his biology teacher, had called the Washington house. Mrs. Washington, my daughter Emma is starting at Lincoln High next year. She has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair. I was wondering, would it be possible for her to meet Michael? I think it would mean a lot for her to see someone like her succeeding at the school. That meeting had led to regular gatherings of families dealing with disability issues, a support network that provided both practical advice and emotional encouragement. Michael found himself becoming a mentor and advocate, helping younger students navigate the challenges of high school with disabilities. On the anniversary of the false alarm incident, Lincoln High School held its first annual Diversity and Inclusion Day. Students organized presentations about different cultures, abilities, and backgrounds represented in their school community. Michael was asked to speak at the opening assembly. Standing, or rather, sitting at the podium where his mother had delivered her budget presentation a year earlier, Michael looked out at an auditorium filled with students, teachers, and parents. The same space where Karen Whitmore had tried to destroy his family's reputation had become a platform for celebrating differences. Last year, someone tried to use my disability as a weapon, he began, his voice clear and strong through the sound system. They thought that fear and prejudice were more powerful than truth and community. They were wrong. He paused, looking directly at some of the students who had initially avoided him after the incident, but had since become friends and allies. I learned that day that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right, even when you are scared. It's about standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. It's about choosing to build bridges instead of walls. The applause that followed was warm and sustained. But more importantly, it felt genuine. These weren't people clapping out of pity or obligation. They were celebrating a community that had chosen to grow stronger through adversity. After the assembly, as students and families mingled in the lobby, Michael was approached by a young girl he didn't recognize. She was maybe 13 years old, walking with the careful gait of someone with a balance disorder. "Excuse me," she said shyly. "Are you Michael Washington?" "That's me," he said with a smile. "What's your name?" "I'm Rebecca. I'm going to be a freshman here next year, and I have a balance problem that makes me fall sometimes. My mom was worried about me starting high school, but after hearing your speech today..." She trailed off, looking down at her feet. Michael maneuvered his wheelchair closer. "After hearing my speech, what?" he prompted gently. Rebecca looked up, her eyes bright with determination. "After hearing your speech, I think maybe high school won't be so scary after all. If you can stand up to people who try to hurt you, maybe I can too." Michael felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with his medical condition. This was why his mother had fought so hard for special needs funding. This was why he'd refused to let Karen's attack drive his family into hiding. Every child deserved to feel like they belonged, like they could succeed, like their differences made them valuable rather than vulnerable. "Rebecca," he said, "I think you're going to do just fine here. And if you ever need someone to talk to, or if anyone gives you trouble, you know where to find me." As the event wound down and families began to leave, Michael's parents found him near the memorial display that had been created to commemorate the previous year's events. The display included photos from the board meeting, newspaper clippings about Karen's arrest and sentencing, and testimonials from community members about the importance of standing up to prejudice. "Ready to go home, son?" his father asked. Michael took one last look around the lobby where so much had changed in the past year. The same space where he'd been viewed with suspicion and fear was now hosting a celebration of diversity and inclusion. The same community that had initially turned away from his family had rallied to support them and others facing similar challenges. "Yeah, I'm ready," he said. "But Dad, what's that?" "I'm proud of what we did. I'm proud that we didn't give up." Angela Washington wiped a tear from her eye as she walked beside her son's wheelchair toward the exit. "I'm proud of you too, baby. You turned something terrible into something beautiful." Outside, the spring evening was warm and filled with the sound of families talking and laughing as they made their way to their cars. The trauma of that terrible Tuesday morning seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by the stronger memories of community, courage, and hope. As the Washington family drove home, Michael looked out the window at the familiar streets of his neighborhood. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, college applications, final exams, the ongoing work of building a more inclusive community. But tonight, he was content to know that sometimes, when good people stand together against fear and hatred, the good people win. The false alarm that had been meant to destroy his family had instead awakened something powerful in their community. And that, Michael thought, as he watched the streetlights flicker on in the growing dusk, was a victory worth celebrating. In the end, Karen Whitmore had gotten one thing right. Michael Washington was indeed a threat. He was a threat to ignorance, to complacency, to the idea that disabled people should quietly accept whatever treatment they received. He was a threat to anyone who believed that fear could triumph over compassion, that prejudice could overcome justice, that a single act of cruelty could silence an entire community's capacity for good. And as his mother had learned over the past year, sometimes the most dangerous threats to hatred and injustice come from the people who refuse to be silenced, who insist on fighting back with truth and courage, and the unshakable belief that everyone, regardless of their abilities or differences, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. The false alarm was over, but the real awakening was just beginning.